Hello, this is Daniel Mart back again. I am an actor and filmmaker based out of South Florida, and for this video, I just want to give some ideas as to what they could do for Final Destination 7. Yeah, with the success of Bloodlines, both the financial and critical success, I think it's pretty crazy to deny the fact that they will do a Final Destination 7 pretty soon, if it's not already confirmed. If anything, I'm kind of surprised it's not already confirmed, if I'm being completely honest. But 100% they're gonna do it, Final Destination 7. I don't think they're gonna wait 14, 15 years like they did between Final Destination 5 and Bloodlines. I think that'd be crazy. And even then, the only reason there was that split, that hiatus between 5 and 6, was mostly due to essentially studio interference and them not really being able to hold down a story or pin down a story until quite recently. And even then, they got interfered more recently with stuff like COVID and both the IATSE and SAG-AFTRA strikes. So that's why it took so long. Honestly, had it not been for the strikes and the pandemic, we probably would have gotten this closer maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if we're being completely honest. But yeah, we finally got it now in 2025, and like I said, the success of this movie is just crazy. It's amazing, and I love it. And we're definitely going to get a number 7. So because of that, here are 7 ideas that they could do for Final Destination 7. So for all of these, I do have like the main points, and then I have a bunch of sub-points right under it. So it's going to be really like more than 7. I really don't know. I need to really count how many points I really have under here. And if I'm looking this way a lot, it's because I have my notes right here for this. So yeah, let's get started with my 7th idea. Here we have. So at number 7, I have the directors. Who could direct this movie? So the first couple names I'm going to get out of the way are people who have already directed previous Final Destination movies. First off, we have James Wan. Wong, not Wan. That's a bit confusing. James Wan is the guy who did Saw and Insidious. James Wong is this guy. He directed Final Destinations 1 and 3. I also have Stephen Quayle, who directed Final Destination 5, and the current directors of Final Destination 6, Zach Lebowski and Adam B. Stein. The only director I don't have here is the guy who directed Final Destination 2 and 4, David R. Ellis, mostly because he died, so he can't really direct from beyond the grave. But yeah, I mean, let me just get those names out of the way, people who have already worked in the franchise. And it has worked in the past, clearly, with both James Wong and David R. Ellis, with Wong directing Final Destinations 1 and 3, both very popular installments in the franchise, and Ellis directing Final Destination 2, and granted, he did do Final Destination 4, but most of the stuff that's wrong with Final Destination 4 comes more so from the writing than the actual directing. So I think they could just grab one of the previous directors. More than likely, it's going to be the guys from Final Destination 6, Zach Lebowski and Adam B. Stein, if they're going to use anybody again. I think James Wong will just, at this point, will just probably stay as a producer. I think he's a producer right now in the current film. I think. I don't really see him coming back. So if anything, it's going to be the guys who did Final Destination 6. The only thing with them, however, is the fact that they don't really want to come back unless there is a story to be told. So I'm not really sure at this moment if they want to come back in that regard. According to the interview they did in Collider, that's what they said. Hey, if there's an idea that's interesting enough, then we'll come back. If not, sorry, not sorry. That's kind of the situation. So we'll see what happens. Some other people I have here, I do have a bunch more people who I think could direct. So if they want to keep the fun tone, the fun comedic tone that we've had for the past, since Final Destination 3, really, I want to say, since 3, maybe 4, where they want to keep this kind of comedic, very comedic and lighthearted tone. I do have a few other ideas. First off, I have the guys from Radio Silence, that whole production team, that whole directing, writing, and production team, just the guys from Radio Silence. They've done Ready or Not, they did Screams 5 and 6, and Abigail recently, so I think they could be a very interesting voice for Final Destination. The one thing I am a little bit wary about is the fact that they're taking over another franchise. They took over Scream, and now they're taking over, they would, in this case, they would be taking over Final Destination. The one thing with that, though, is the fact that they may have left Scream, to be honest with you. Scream 7 is like in tremendo limbo, given a bunch of controversies as of late, with them basically firing most of the cast and trying to bring other cast members back and this and that. So it's one of those things that I don't think they're returning for Scream 7, not that I've seen, or maybe I have seen, I just kind of forgot at this point. But I do think Radio Silence, it would be a very interesting, that whole team would be a very interesting voice for Final Destination. And I do think they'll bring probably some of the sharpest comedic elements to the Final Destination movies that we've seen in some time. So we do have that. Next up, I have Gerard Johnston. He's the guy who directed both Megan movies, Megan and Megan 2.0, the one that's coming out later this year, if I'm not mistaken. That seems to have kind of a Terminator 2 twist to it. So I think he could be a very interesting choice. Again, very modern director, again, with that comedic edge. Again, which is what the current movies, Final Destination movies, seem to be having. Despite the fact that there is this gap of 15 years between 5 and 6, they still have that comedic element, that sharp comedic element. So that's why I have him here. kind of go along with that, again, with that sharp comedic element, we also have Christopher Landon. He's the guy who directed Happy Death Day, both Happy Death Day movies, Freaky and Drop, which came out earlier this year. I haven't seen Drop, but a lot of people liked it, and from what I understand, Drop is a bit more of a serious film, as opposed to Happy Death Days, the 2 Happy Death Day movies, and Freaky. With him, especially Christopher Landon, it does seem like he likes to take a more supernatural or sci-fi look at the story. Again, we have both Death Day movies, we have Freaky in there. Again, I haven't seen Drop, but that does seem to be a little bit more grounded. But with the latter movies, I think that could be a very interesting thing to explore in a Final Destination movie. I'm not going to say we haven't really explored it, because we definitely have explored it throughout the series, throughout the franchise. But to have a director who is known for really looking into that stuff within their movies, looking at the supernatural / scientific elements of the movie, I think will be very interesting for this movie, for a theoretical Final Destination 7, especially if he directs it. Next up, a kind of an out-of-nowhere pick for me, and maybe it makes no sense, but I think it would be very interesting if you do kind of want to genre bend this a little bit. Michael Bay, I think, would be a very interesting choice. Now, here's the thing. He hasn't really directed that many horror movies, or if any, the closest thing he has to directing a horror movie is really Ambulance from, is it last year or 2 years ago, I want to say, with Jake Gyllenhaal. That's the closest thing he's done to directing a horror movie, and really that's more of an action thriller. But I think it could work. Here's the thing, he's produced a lot of horror projects. He's produced a lot of the Purge movies, and as well as the Purge TV show, for example. Both Quiet Place movies, or all 2 or 3 Quiet Place movies, as well as Drop, funny enough, from Christopher Landon. So he is in the horror sphere. It's just the fact that he hasn't directed. So if he really wants to direct something horror, and granted, make it a bit more actiony, I think Final Destination will be a pretty interesting choice. Again, you do have Ambulance. You also have stuff like Transformers and 13 Hours. For me, what actually is kind of a good thing, even though the Transformer movies do get goofy, it does mean that he knows how to work with CGI, which is something that a lot of the recent movies have been criticized a lot with the usage of CGI. Granted, Final Destination 6 and 5, I think, do a better job than 3 and 4 in incorporating their CGI, but if they're going to continue on with the CGI fest, have one of the guys, Michael Bay, have one of the guys who's known for using CGI in Expanse. So go ahead with that. And honestly, if he could also take a more serious tone, as we've seen with 13 Hours and Ambulance again. So I think this one is actually one that could work, honestly, a lot more than you think. Kind of going on with the genre bending a little bit, I have Craig Zobel, and he's directed The Hunt, but he's also directed a bunch of episodes of Penguin and Compliance. And here's the thing with Final Destination. Look at Final Destination 1 and 5 specifically. You do have this kind of like crime scene investigation element to the movie. So, you know, having that explored again will be very interesting, especially in this modern day of movies, modern day takes. And yes, we have Bloodlines, and that, they, of course, for obvious reasons, we saw the movie, they didn't really have the police procedure element of it. But if you want to bring that back, have someone who's working on Penguin, have somebody who's kind of worked in that sphere of crime drama, I think would be very interesting. Craig Zobel, I think, would be a very interesting choice. Kind of by that similar logic, I also have Mark Mylod. He's the guy who directed The Menu, but he's also directed a bunch of episodes of Succession, Shameless, and Game of Thrones, and Last of Us. So he's more of a TV director, which I think if they're going to use a lower budget, maybe using a TV director is actually kind of a good thing, because they know how to work in a limited budget. He has worked on horror projects, again, The Menu and Last of Us, and maybe even Game of Thrones to a certain extent. I'm not sure which episodes, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but, you know, that does have kind of a fantasy horror element at times. And if you want to bring it back to a more serious tone, something like Shameless and Succession definitely is a great idea to incorporate there. If you want to have some auteur directors, I don't really think they're gonna get like big auteur directors anytime soon, but I think my 2 auteur director picks here I have. First off, Sam Raimi. I mean, I think Sam Raimi directing a Final Destination movie would just be wild. Of course, he's done Evil Dead, he worked on Spider-Man, he did Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. So he's definitely somebody who both can work within the studio system, but still make a movie his own way. And I think that'd be very good. And he'd be a very big proponent of practical effects, which is something that the Final Destination movies drastically and desperately need. They haven't really used them to great effect since, honestly, Final Destination 2, I want to say. Going by that same logic, in terms of like auteur directors, I also have Scott Derrickson. Recently, he's done The Black Phone, but he's also done Sinister and Exorcism of Emily Rose. Again, I think that'd be a very interesting take. Definitely a more serious take as well. If you want to like leave the whole comedy aspect of the Final Destination movie and bring it back to a more grounded, more quote-unquote realistic, a more serious tone back, like especially like the first movie was, I think bringing in somebody like Scott Derrickson will help a lot. And again, Sam Raimi again, to touch back on Sam Raimi, again, you do have the practical effects in there. It's going to jump off from there with the practical effects. I'm just going to have 2, which I don't think they'll do anytime soon, but screw it, why not? We kind of need practical effects back in Final Destination. So first off, I have Greg Nicotero. of course, The Walking Dead and Creepshow, and he has directed both episodes of The Walking Dead and Creepshow. If I'm not mistaken, he actually started, or he was creator of Creepshow, the recent Creepshow series. So I think he'd be great. Of course, the practical effects there will be wild in this regard. Again, I think we really do need to go back to practical effects. Even if he's not a director, just bring him on for the sake of practical effects. And by that same logic, Tom Savini, again, he's worked on Creepshow. He's also done some other movies like Night of the Living Dead, the remake from like the 90s. So, bring him back there, just again, for the sake of practical effects. I'll be honest though, I don't think Tom Savini will be the best director, if I'm being honest with you, despite the fact that he's done stuff like Creepshow and Night of the Living Dead. I don't think he'd be the best director for this franchise, but I kind of just want to bring it back, the idea of practical effects. So that's basically why I have him here. So just to go over the directors again I have in mind, James Wong, Stephen Quayle, and Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein, just for the sake that they've directed Final Destination movies in the past. Radio Silent, Gerard Johnson, and Christopher Landon, because of their great mix of comedic and horror elements in their movies. Michael Bay, if you want to genre bend it a bit to have it be a more action-centered movie. Craig Zobo, Mark Mylod, if you want to bring a more serious tone to the movie. Scott Derrickson and Sam Raimi, just to have a bit well-known auteur director there, and again, have more serious tone, as well as bring more practical effects to the mix. And same thing with Greg Nicotero and Tom Savini for more practicality to the effects in that regard. So yeah, that's why I have number 7, the directors. At number 6, I have... So for number 6, I have Death's Rules, and basically evolving Death's Rules. And I have 3 ideas for what they could do for Death's Rules to change it up, essentially. Now, the first thing I have here is something that they've tried to do in the past, but they've never really succeeded. It's something that's always landed in the cutting room floor. It's always become a deleted scene, and that is trying to properly explain and explore the idea of somebody dying ahead of time. And this is kind of referenced in Final Destination 3 with Ian, where he says, okay, cool, what if the last person on the list dies first? Now here's the thing, Death tries to make sure that people die in order. However, we've seen it twice because they're deleted scenes, that the last person, which is usually the visionary, that the last person on the list does die. We've seen it in the deleted scenes of Final Destination 1 and Final Destination 4. In both cases, Alex Browning and what's his face, Nick O'Bannon, both of them in the deleted scenes, they've died. They've canonically died in those deleted scenes. And from there, we have 2 separate outcomes. Now, in Final Destination 1, the outcome was that Alex Browning, he grabbed the wires that were about to electrocute Claire while she was in her car, and he grabbed the wires, the electrical wiring, and he explodes back into the garage. It's set on fire. He's electrocuted, whatever, and he dies. Cut to the next few scenes is the fact that Claire gives birth, and it's confirmed that her and Carter both survive. So you have that avenue to explore. On the other avenue, you have the Final Destination 4 idea where Nick, he sees the vision of the mall exploding, so he goes to the mall, and instead of trying to put out the fire, he grabs a gas tank and jumps out a window, and he dies after he crashes onto a police car, and logically he dies at that point. And Lori and Janet, they notice an explosion outside, they go outside, and immediately they are killed by Death. So you have those 2 ideas, and I think the best idea to go forth with this is to have the character survive. Now, I do think that if they're going to explore this idea, it has to be at the end of the movie. I don't think it will make sense for it to be halfway through the movie. I think it would have to be towards the end of the movie, and that'd be a very interesting new way to cheat Death. Mostly because it wouldn't make sense for Death to just be like, screw it, I'm just going to kill you now, despite the fact that the last guy died. At that point, I feel like you kind of need to cheat Death. It's kind of one of those things. That's the only way I can see it really happening. It really makes sense, because if Death is just going to kill the characters regardless, then what's the point of having the order, in my opinions? And again, they've tried to explore this in the past, but both times, just the audience doesn't like it in test screenings, so they've never really explored it. But I would really want them to explore that. And even if not the visionary, maybe have somebody else just die ahead of time. So I think that would be a very interesting thing to do. The next thing I think they should explore in regards to Death's Rules is have somebody survive the movie because they've killed somebody else. And we've explored this in Final Destination 5, but I think it could have been explored better. Yeah, that is canonically one of the ways that somebody could, quote-unquote, cheat Death. If you kill somebody, you get the rest of their time, and you move on with life. So have somebody, any movie, kill somebody and actually survive past the end of the movie. Maybe have them appear again in the sequel, or not, it doesn't really matter, but it's just the idea that they've actually survived, have somebody actually survive through that way. I think that would be very cool, very interesting as well, and I would love to see that past, what happened in Final Destination 5. The way they used it was cool, it was a good idea, but the fact that it was never properly implemented in that way, and it caused some confusion at the end with other details, I think just kind of left a little bit more to be desired in that regard. And here's a very interesting one, and this comes from the deleted scenes of Final Destination 3. And here's a very interesting one, and this comes from the choose your own adventure stuff that happens in Final Destination 3. And yeah, in Final Destination 3, since they shot so much footage, they have this thing on the bonus features called Choose Your Own Fate. And at the very beginning of the movie, you have a Choose Your Own Fate where you could either get on or get off the roller coaster with the 4 characters, Wendy, Kevin, and their dates, Jason, and whatever the other girl is called. Julie? Is that her name? Julie or something like that? No, that's a sister. Whatever. Or Carrie, Karen, something like that. Whatever. Where the 4 of them, before they even get onto the roller coaster, they survive the roller coaster accident. Just them 4 survive because they decide not to get on the roller coaster. However, then it's revealed that they took the life, or the remaining time left, of the people who replaced them on the roller coaster. And I think that could be a very interesting idea. Now, I do think it'd have to be a very specific disaster for that to occur, because you would need to have a situation where, let's say, 5-6 people get off a thing, or like they don't go to a thing, and then 6 people willingly or like actively replace them. It has to be one of those things where it can't be like a tower disaster, because like that could be anybody. Like them being there doesn't mean them being there or not being there doesn't mean that their place is going to be replaced, so to speak. It needs to be a situation where we know they're going to be actively replaced. But because of that, we don't know the order. And the reason we don't know the order is because since they took the place of somebody else, death is gonna follow them based on who dies next from the replaced lives. The one downside to this is the fact that I don't think, theoretically, it wouldn't make sense for the people whose life they replaced. It wouldn't make sense for them to be dying within like the next, let's say, month or so. Logically, they'd have a longer lifespan. You know, it'd be like years, maybe even decades. So that's the one thing, and they kind of reference that in that deleted scene. So I don't think this is the best idea, but I think it would be a very interesting thing to look at. But I just wanted to throw it in there. So yeah, that's my number 6 idea for Death's Rows to be explored. Let's see what we have for number 5. At number 5, we have... At number 5, we have a few visionary ideas. And what I mean by the visionary is the people who actually have the premonition, people who actually have the vision. And here I have some very interesting ideas. One idea that I've always liked, but I don't know how they'd really incorporate it, to be honest, is the fact that they should have 2 visionaries. And the best way I think they can incorporate this is, honestly, if you have the main visionary, let's say the main character, but you have another character who kind of has more of an idea of what's going on, and then it's later revealed that they are also a visionary, and maybe we see parts of the vision through their point of view. I think that would be kind of interesting. I really don't know how they would incorporate this, but I think that would be a very interesting idea just in general. Or maybe even have it where you have one person who's the main visionary, but you have another person who has an idea of how people are going to die, similar to, like, honestly, Final Destination 4, where they kind of see visions of who's going to die or how it's going to happen. I think that would be another interesting idea to explore in that regard. Next up, I have the fact that the visionary actually survives the premonition. We've never seen that. The closest we've ever seen to that is actually in Bloodlines, but that's because of the fact that the vision she's having is really a flashback, so logically she wasn't even born at that time to even be at the disaster. But have the premonition person, have the visionary actually survive the disaster. I think that'll make a very interesting twist. The closest we've had to somebody surviving the premonition is honestly Final Destination 5, where Molly survived, but again, having the actual premonition person, the word is visionary. I don't know why I keep saying premonition person, but having the person who has a vision, the visionary, actually survive, I think will bring some very intriguing substance to it, intriguing drama to it. Why do you survive? Why is it the person that's seen the vision? Why do you survive? And why do we all have to die now? I could really see something like happening where maybe one of the other victims of the disaster tries to go after the visionary, thus leading to my next idea. Have the visionary die halfway through the film. Now, that doesn't mean they have to die halfway through the vision. We've actually never seen a visionary who dies in the middle of the vision. The closest we have to that is actually Bloodlines, and that's because Bloodsworth, theoretically, not even theoretically, just canonically, would die after Iris. That's the closest, but again, she doesn't die in the middle. She dies at the end, but have somebody actually, the visionary, actually die halfway through the film. Now, through what means? I'm not really sure through what means they would need to die. Maybe a lot of people had skipped and they die. Maybe somebody goes after the visionary because, oh, you're the visionary or you're lying or whatever, so I'm going to kill you instead. Maybe that could be an idea as well. But I think that would be very interesting. Have the person who theoretically would have the most knowledge as to what's going on be the person who dies halfway through the film. Again, I think that would be very cool, very interesting, and it'll bring a pretty interesting idea of a false protagonist. I mean, we've never really had a false protagonist in the series, so having a false protagonist for even a movie, I think would be pretty cool. So yeah, those are my ideas for the visionary ideas. Next up at number 4. So at number 4, I have the idea that they should make a story based on disasters from the movies that we already know. And really, I think this only could really apply to 3 disasters that we know that have happened within the movies. First off, I think the Springfield Central Mall disaster, the explosion from Final Destination 4. One of my biggest gripes with the series, which was kind of addressed in Final Destination 6 and Bloodlines, although not to my favorite, not my favorite way, but it was still addressed in some capacity. I think it was very indirectly addressed, but it's the fact that this mall disaster has never really been established to have happened, so to speak, and it's very controversial in my opinion, because it's one of those things. Some people are saying that, oh, Death or whoever gave Nick O'Bannon the vision, so therefore, since he stopped it, that means everybody survives. But the fact that they all survive, what does that mean? Now, in Bloodlines, that means, okay, cool, it doesn't matter. All these people are going to die. However, some people are saying, no, it's probably not going to happen, because theoretically, Death would need to break his own list, because theoretically, that means Jen is going to die before Lori and Nick. And it doesn't make sense, because this isn't that. Look, I frankly don't care. Final Destination 4, the characters, who cares? If Janet dies, I kind of don't care. But I've always wanted there to be a follow-up, even if just like a newspaper clipping, saying that, hey, this is what happened to some of the survivors of this mall disaster, what happened to them? Because logically, we saw that place explode. We saw that going off the walls. The escalators were falling down, the theater was in flames, people were dying in fire and explosions. So maybe there was another visionary who saw everything, and maybe they tried to get some people out of the way. Who knows? But now we have Death again going after some of these survivors. I think that would be a great disaster. And you can also take it from different angles. You don't have to show the exact ways that Bobby Campbell and that Nick saw the vision. If anything, I think a very interesting idea. And granted, you maybe have to bring back Bobby Campbell for this one. Maybe. Not really sure it matters all too much. Because it'd be one of those ideas where whoever the visionary is, maybe they had the same idea of like, oh crap, maybe I should go put out this fire. And when they reach there, they see Bobby Campbell, they see Nick O'Bannon, nailed to the wall after the fire is done, and they're the ones that help him. And maybe you get a quick scene at one point afterwards, right before Nick and company die. But just to get kind of that connective tissue with that, I've always wanted there to be a follow-up. And it kind of drives me crazy that we've never gotten a follow-up in any regard to this. And again, the biggest reason is because, maybe this vision wasn't supposed to happen. But my thought in this is the fact that if a vision happens, that means it was meant to occur no matter what. So that's just me. Another disaster that they could also follow up on is the theater collapse that Rory was supposed to go to. So Rory's backstory in Final Destination 2 is the fact that he was in France. He was supposed to go watch a movie. I think it was a movie, or maybe it was like a play. But whatever. He was going to go to this theater, and it collapsed. And the only reason he didn't go is because he saw Carter get swung and hit by the fence, the 180 sign, and of course he died. And that's the only reason he didn't go. I think they could do that. Honestly, I think that'd be a very interesting thing to do. Final Destination 2 is one of the more beloved movies in the franchise, especially with Bloodlines having so many references to the second movie. I think, you know what? Have another reference to the movie, to Final Destination 2, and do this disaster. The one thing with this is the fact that it would have to be an international story, but I personally don't mind it being an international story. We've actually had international stories in the comics and the novels, so that wouldn't be the biggest leap in logic, to be honest with you. But yeah, it would have to be an international story in this regard. Now the question is, do you have it be all in French? I don't think you'd go full French. Maybe have like a group of tourists or something like that, or maybe 1 or 2 tourists, and them trying to like grab other people to survive or whatever, and maybe have some like a French and English film right there. Maybe that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I do think they could explore that disaster. I think it'd be very cool. And then the last disaster I have here is actually the most recent disaster, and have the train crash from Bloodlines at the very end of the movie, the train disaster that kills Charlie and Stephanie, have that be a premonition in of itself. And that's honestly been one of the biggest gripes, not just for me, but apparently from other people. A lot of people thought that they should have done a Final Destination 3 and have that train disaster be a premonition. Well, now you can. In Final Destination 7, maybe that could be a premonition in of itself. Again, people survive, and the story continues as is. So yeah, that's my number 4 idea for what we have here, have the disasters being known to us already. So we already have some basis in it. And the beauty with all these, honestly, is the fact that it would have to be a new cast of characters regardless. So it's not like we know who's there. The closest thing to that is maybe Rory, that we knew Rory is going to be there, but like I don't see a reason why he would be referenced in any regard. Maybe Bloodlines, but that'd be like more through news clippings. Again, the closest one we could really have a direct connection to would be the mall disaster, and even then, you don't really need to have it past maybe the opening scene. So yeah, at number 3 we have. So at number 3, I have specific groups of people. I think there's a lot of specific groups of people that they really could do this with. And I think that'd be some of the most exciting stuff to do. So the first one, which is one that's been talked about extensively, it was actually thought to be the original idea for Final Destination 6, and it's to have it based on first responders. So I think this would be a very cool idea to have it be based on first responders. The one thing with this is the fact that there would already need to be a disaster to have had, so that there could be first responders. So it's one of those things where, let's say with one of the collapses, let's say with the tower collapse in Final Destination 6, had that happened, let's say, of course the first responders got there, they're cleaning up, and then maybe instead of the roof where it all collapsed, like the restaurant, maybe then afterwards, while they're cleaning it up, the rest of the tower collapses, and that's how they die. That's the one thing where they'd have to actively be at a disaster point already for there to be first responders. And the first responders could be a combination of cops, firefighters, and medics. I think that would be pretty cool. Maybe have a few random civilians there as well. I mean, on average, we have about, 6 to 8 different survivors for any given disaster. So I think that could work. And again, it's an idea that's been proposed for several years, basically a decade at this point. Again, it was the original idea for Final Destination 6. So to eventually revisit that idea, I think would be very cool. And again, since it's an idea they've already had in the past, why not just do it finally and go from there? The next idea I have, which I personally like, is to have it based on the military, have it be based on soldiers, and I kind of do have a basis for this in the novels, which I'll get to later. I think that could be a very interesting idea. Maybe it's a whole platoon or whatever, and they're off at war. Maybe there's some kind of military explosion, or something happens at the base, or I don't know what the disaster could be, but I think that would be a very interesting idea, just to have it be based on soldiers, especially because they are so used to death in that regard. So it's one of those things, like, the reason they don't believe the visionaries is because, like, oh, you're just having a goddamn panic attack, who cares? Yes, of course there's a possibility that we're gonna die, we're about to go into battle, what do you expect? But of course with Death's plan, it's not that simple. So I think that could be a very interesting idea. If they do this idea and connect it to the novels, it could be one of those things where it's Final Destination 7 leads into Final Destination 8. That's all I'm going to say for now, until I get to the novels. Next up, I have be based on celebrities. This is something they've also done a little bit in the novels, where one of the books took place with a bunch of models and photographers and whatever. So I do think, so there was that story, and they have another story where there's a serial killer who goes after, like, famous, like, television hosts and DJs and stuff like that, or like TV personalities. But honestly, I think this would be very interesting, and for one specific reason. And granted, I don't know how the fans like us would react to it, but I think I would find it very interesting, and that is just to make it meta. Have to be based on celebrities and make it meta. And what I mean by that is, like, have the celebrities be like actors, the directors, whatever, who are making a Final Destination movie in the world of Final Destination. And why I say this could actually be very interesting is because we actually have the basis of this in the universe itself. Both in Final Destination 2 and Final Destination 4, they make references to the fact that there is a Final Destination movie within the world of Final Destination. If you look in the clippings in Claire's newspaper clippings that she has on her wall, there's a newspaper that says Final Destination movie in the works, or something like that, or like there's a movie based on the Flight 180 incident or something like that. There's a newspaper clipping to that. And then in Final Destination 4, if you look in the theater, there's a movie poster that kind of references Final Destination. So and it's even a sequel on top of that. So the fact that that Final Destination movies, quote unquote movies, exist in the world of Final Destination, I think will be very cool. You could make it very meta, kind of like Scream, where they have the Stab series. It's kind of the same logic in that regard. So instead of Final Destination, it could be Final Location, or This Is the End, or whatever. I think that would be very interesting. Also, with the fact that they are celebrities, you'd have that be actually on the news, like, constantly, like your favorite actors had just survived this event. Maybe there was a disaster at the Met Gala, I don't know. Or there's a disaster while they were filming Final Destination, or this happened, or that happened, or that happened. It's the fact that they all survived, and now every week when a new person dies, who was supposed to die in that disaster. I think that would make it very meta. And the fact that you have the public, so to speak, in the news after each of them, trying to ask them, like paparazzi, saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about that? I think would be very interesting, and I think would be a very new angle, nice angle to explore, and honestly could bring a lot of comedic elements to that. Another idea I have, and I don't have it as mapped out as I had the other ideas, But have a group of prisoners, I don't know, maybe have a prison riot and something happens. I think that could be nice. Maybe have a few cops in the mix. Honestly, given the fact that a lot of horror movies nowadays kind of want to send a message, maybe you could even add the message of, something like, maybe it's some kind of Black Lives Matter message to it. Granted, people really don't want woke cinema anymore, so there is that. But I don't know, maybe have some kind of BLM message in there, or like why the prison system sucks, or I don't know, maybe something could happen there. But I do think just the idea of just prisoners or like a prison riot being there will be kind of interesting. The one bad thing about this too is the fact that you would have a lot of unlikable characters. Theoretically, I don't see a reason why you would have likable characters. So that is the one thing that's kind of bad with this idea. Again, this idea for me isn't as fleshed out, but I do think it would be kind of an interesting idea. The next idea is one that I'm kind of surprised they haven't explored as much in this movie, even if just with one character. And granted, I'm saying this as a group of people, but I think just having one character in this would be interesting, and that's having kind of like a religious, whether it be a very religious person or just having a straight up quote in the movie. Maybe there is a person who likes the idea of Final Destination, or like they've followed it just like Iris has, and they're trying to like kill people in the same manner as death, or something like that. Maybe having somebody who like sees this as a religion, death as a religion, would be very interesting. Or if not, have it like Jim Jones, some kind of Jim Jones style disaster, and just kind of go from there. I think that could be a very interesting. Again, this idea for me isn't as developed as some of the previous ideas I've had here, but I think that could be a very interesting idea. And then the last idea I have here, and I kind of just threw it in here because I don't know where else to put it, and that's just to bring back Kimberly and Thomas. So canonically, according to Bloodlines, Kimberly, and by extension Thomas, both have survived no matter what. They have survived. So, bring them back as Tony Todd. More so Kimberly than Thomas, to be honest with you. Although it is kind of my headcanon that they are married. I just see that as my headcanon. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be married. I mean, at the very least, they'd still be friends. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be friends. But it is kind of my headcanon that they are married, despite the fact that they are about 10 years apart. That's the one thing. Depending on where you look at, Thomas is either 25 or 30. So they're about 5 to 10 years apart. That is the one thing that kind of puts a pause on me. If they're 5 years apart, okay, that's cool. But if they're 10 years apart, I do kind of like, that age gap is a little bit weird for me. And that's about it. I just didn't know where else to throw this in. So yeah, bring back Kimberly and Thomas. More so Kimberly, to be honest with you. It's one of those things. If they bring back Kimberly and Thomas, I think they need to survive at least one movie. Especially Kimberly. Maybe they have Thomas be the stinger death. I think maybe that's an idea. Kimberly, I think, needs to survive at least 1 or 2 movies. And that's the thing. Bring her back in a Tony Todd style capacity. Have her be the harbinger of death, so to speak. Since she knows the rules at this point. And she's probably talked to I don't see a reason why she wouldn't have stopped talking to what's his face, to Tony Todd, to Bloodsworth. I don't really see a deal and a reason why she wouldn't have continued to keep talking with him, because I feel like after the fact that she survived, Tony Todd, his character, would be like, wait, you survived? You actually did this? Wow, you're successful. And given the fact that she's the only person who's ever done that, apparently, I think that's one of those things that she probably knows Iris. It's one of those things like Iris more than likely has talked to her and Thomas. So I think that there is a very nice connective tissue there. So that's what I have here for specific groups. Have it be based on first responders, mostly because that's an idea they've always had. Have it be based on soldiers. Again, there's some connective tissue there with novels, which I'll get to soon. Celebrities, I think it can make it very meta. I think that'd be great. Prisoners, religious cults, why not? And yeah, just bring back Kimberly and Thomas. I think that'd be great. So yeah, at number 2, we have... So at number 2, I say we just directly adapt stuff from the novels. Now, Bloodlines did adapt stuff from the novels, but it wasn't a direct adaptation. It was more so inspiration. They took inspiration from the second novel, Don't Look Back. And that's really it. They took inspiration. However, I always thought that if they were going to bring back Final Destination, they should take one of the novels and just directly adapt them, honestly. And my first pick is honestly Dead Reckoning, which is the first movie, the first novel they've ever done, mostly because it's the easiest one to adapt. It's based on the Club Kitty disaster. That's the main disaster there, which is a club collapse, like a nightclub that collapses. You had a rock band that was playing there, and because the infrastructure of the club just wasn't that good, it eventually collapses. The main visionary is the lead singer of this band. And the reason I think they should adapt this one is because it's just the easiest one to adapt. You don't really have to deal with the rules that much. Very simple. People survive, death is coming after them, they all die, that's it. I think it's the easiest one to adapt, and I always thought that if you're going to adapt one of the novels, this one will probably be the first one they choose or consider, because it's just so easy. It's just such a straight, narrow, simple path. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to reinvent it. And that's really why I think they should probably adapt this one. I think it'd be the easiest one to adapt without having stuff with the lore, with the larger lore or the larger stuff to do with Death's rules. I think this one will be a great one to adapt. Next up, I think they could also adapt the third novel, End of the Line. Now, the one bad thing is the disaster here, and that's the fact it's a train derailment, the 30-second train derailment. Now, here's the thing. I'm not the biggest fan of train derailments in the franchise. Granted, I did propose the idea that they could do one based on the Bloodlines train derailment as well, just because we have it there. But if I'm being honest, I'm not the biggest fan of train derailments in the franchise. I don't really care for Final Destination 3 for either of the disasters, whether it be the roller coaster or the train derailment at the end of that movie. I just feel like the way they've done it both times just hasn't been satisfying. That's just to me. So that is the one bad thing about this, the fact that it'll be another train derailment. And I'll be honest, even the train derailment in Bloodlines wasn't my favorite. It seemed just a little bit random, and part of the reason I didn't like it is because I just didn't like the CGI with how they killed the two characters, and I think they could have done more with that train derailment plot-wise, but that's besides the point. So that is the one little gripe I have with this. However, they do have something interesting that they could do with End of the Line if they adapt this book, this novel, and it's the fact that you have a separate person who's not part of the death list, who's not visionary exactly, it's kind of visionary adjacent, where they know these people are going to die, they just don't know how they're going to die. You have a separate person, separate from the list, and they're trying to help out the group. However, in them helping out, they also inadvertently caused all the survivors' deaths. So I think that could be a very interesting twist. We've never really seen that, having a separate person outside of the whole unit be there trying to help. The closest thing we have to that is Final Destination 2, but Claire doesn't really like cause their deaths. You know, she's kind of there, and even then, I'm not gonna say she's badly utilized, but I do think they could have done more with her in that role. Another novel they could adapt is Looks Could Kill, and that's the 5th novel in the series. That one features the Coral Clipper disaster, the Coral Clipper sinking. Funny enough, this disaster happens on the exact same day and year as the disaster from Final Destination 3, as the roller coaster disaster in Final Destination 3. Like, canonically, they both occur on the exact same day. The only difference is that this one takes place in Miami, so where I live, in Miami Beach, essentially, in the afternoon, in like the daytime, afternoon, whatever, whereas the disaster in Final Destination 3 happens at night in McKinley, Pennsylvania. And the reason why I think it'd be really cool for them to adapt this one is because you have the visionary making a deal with death themselves. So what happens in the incident is the fact that they all survive, but I guess in a way to like get back at the fact that, hey, you saved all these people, death somehow manages to like damage the visionary's face, their models. That's what I was talking about. Hey, if you're gonna do a celebrity story, here's another idea for a celebrity story where all these people are models and photographers and all this stuff. So because she's a model and because looks are what define her, again, the book is called Looks Could Kill, is the fact that, hey, since you're a model and you basically make your livelihood on your face, I'm going to get payback on you for now and destroy your face. But afterwards, in her coma, so to speak, she makes a deal with death. And just like in the last idea I had, where End of the Line, where you have a person who's accidentally causing the death of all these people, now you have the fact that you have the visionary of all people actually willingly going after all the survivors and willingly killing them in the process or causing their deaths. I think that would be very interesting. I think that'd be very cool and a very nice twist to the visionary, because every single time we've seen the visionary as a good guy, as a protagonist. So now to have them be basically the antagonist, I think that'd be very cool. And again, it brings that element of, hey, if you kill people, what happens next? And then the last one I have here is actually a novel that was never released. It's called Wipeout. And it's an unreleased novel. It was supposed to be released, but I think the novel before it, I think it probably was Looks to Kill. The reason it was never released is because the company that releases the books, Black Flame Corporation or something like that, they went out of business, and because of that, this book was never released. And I wonder if the manuscript is still somewhere out there, because the idea for this is honestly very interesting. And granted, it's similar to Looks Could Kill in some capacity. I think it still works, and it's the fact, and the main disaster was supposed to be this plane crash. A bunch of people are on a beach, and this plane crashes onto a beach. So I think that disaster could have been okay, to be honest with you. I don't think, it's not my favorite disaster, or not my favorite idea for disaster, but, it works. But the reason I think they could do this is because you have a visionary from another disaster coming up to help death. So again, similar to Looks to Kill in that regard, but it's the fact you have another visionary, somebody who's dealt with this before, and they similarly made a deal with the devil, or made a deal with death, and now they're helping death out and killing a bunch of these people. And just to kind of take it back to the soldier idea that I had And point number 3, the idea for this book is the fact that this visionary was supposed to be a soldier in like Afghanistan or Iraq, because this was early 2000s. So they were supposed to be a soldier from Afghanistan or Iraq, and they saw their whole platoon, their whole squad to die in a vision. They tried to warn them, and they all died, or the same thing. Maybe they survived, and then they got taken off one by one. But this person, and his name actually is Corbin Wainwright. They actually gave this guy a name, Corbin Wainwright. He goes on to make a deal with death. Hey, don't kill me, and if you don't kill me, I'll do this and that for you. And I think this could be a very interesting idea where you could have Final Destination 7 and 8 be connected. Have Final Destination 7 be the whole Corbin Wainwright story, have the soldier story, maybe even incorporate some of Luke's Could Kill in there as well, before going into Wipeout, Final Destination 8, Wipeout. So this is the first idea where I have where it's actually an idea for both movies, 7 and 8. And I think that could be very interesting, especially because this is also an unreleased thing. So just to get this in any capacity will be great, to be honest with you. The fact that we've never seen anything about it aside from like a plot description of this book has always intrigued me, and it kind of sucks that it's unreleased. Again, I really do wonder if there's like a manuscript lying around that we could read or something. Just the one thing with the novels, with all the Final Destination novels, they're stupidly hard to find anywhere. Really, the closest thing you're ever going to get to reading them is if you're going on the fandom and just looking at the behind the scenes details of it, the wiki fandom pages of it, because these books are stupidly hard to find even online for free. Yeah, so the fact that we have one that's unreleased, I think just makes it even better, more interesting, more intriguing, and the fact that since it was never released, you could really flesh out some of these ideas onto the movie. So I think that'd be very cool. And yeah, so again, I think that the books they could adapt, and I do say directly adapt. I don't want them to take inspiration. Wipeout is maybe the one they could probably take the most inspiration from, since it was never released. But I think a direct adaptation of Dead Reckoning, which is the first novel, End of the Line, the third novel, Looks Could Kill, the fifth novel, and again Wipeout, the unreleased novel, I think would be very great. So yeah, now onto my final point, which is, so my final point is the settings, and yeah, just leave the shortest thing for last, because these I'm not going to explain that much. So yeah, just the settings, the time, and place of this. Now, first off, I alluded this earlier in the story, but I think an international story will be great. I alluded to this with the Rory disaster, that they could adapt Rory's disaster into a movie. But I think just having an overall international story will be great. We've had international stories in the novels before. There's one where it takes place in like Japan, I want to say. I want to say it's Japan. I could be wrong, but some kind of island nation. I'm pretty sure maybe it's Hawaii for all I know. I'm just getting the places confused. But I think an international story in general, because I am getting a little bit tired of having it been there in like that Pennsylvania, Upper New York area that they always had. The only movie that I think is a little bit different is Final Destination 4, because there is some, not controversy, but there is some debate as to where it takes place. Some people say it does take place again in McKinley, Pennsylvania, but some people are saying no, it actually takes place like in Indianapolis for whatever reason. I just want to see a different location that's not that Pennsylvania, upstate New York situation. That's just me. I kind of want to see something different, and to make it completely different, I don't know, just make an international story. Have a movie set in Mexico or France or Japan or Italy or South Africa or somewhere else. I don't know. I think that would be great, in my opinion. I just kind of want something international, and maybe you bring a more international flavor to the franchise. Have people speaking different languages. We've never really seen that. Honestly, the fact that Stephanie and Charlie are like Asian, I want to say, or I mean, their last name is Reyes, but they're not necessarily Hispanic. I think the actor who portrays Marty is like Asian, actually. I could be wrong, but maybe, I don't know, have some of the characters speak a different language for like a scene. I think that'd be cool. Maybe it's me being weird, but I just kind of want that. Again, the closest thing we've had to that is maybe it's Final Destination for the first one, where they have that one scene in France, but no, have the full movie take place somewhere else. I think that'd be great. Another idea that I personally have is have a story take place in the past, specifically before the 1900s. We have already in Bloodlines, we have the disaster taking place in 1960, 1968, to be more specific, but I think having something happen even more in the past would be great. That actually is an idea that a lot of fans seem to want, with a lot of people saying, oh, have it take place during like the golden age of piracy in the pirates, have it take place during the Civil War, have it take place during the French Revolution. I've seen a lot of random ideas like that. So for me, I just want a story. I think it'd be cool to have a story take place before the 1900s in general. I think that'd be cool. And last but not least, and it's not really an idea that I have, it's an idea that apparently a lot of people have, and really want to see, and it's the fact that they want to see a Final Destination movie set during Christmas. For me, it's not my go-to idea, and honestly, I don't really see the benefits per se of it taking place during Christmas, if I'm being honest, but a lot of people want to see that, so I'm just putting it in here. So yeah, again, short, sweet, I just kind of want to end this with a short and sweet point. So yeah, for the settings, have it take place during Christmas, have a pre-1900 story, and have it take place somewhere else, international story. And yeah, that's basically it. And just one last go around to go through all my points. For the directors, have James Wan, Stephen Quayle, Zach Lebowski, and Adam B. Stein, because they're all directors of previous movies. Radio Silence, Gerard Johnston and Christopher Landon, because they can mix the comedy and horror elements great. Michael Bay to incorporate some great action into the movies. Greg Zobel, Mark Myland, so they can incorporate some great crime drama into the movies. Scott Derrickson, Sam Raimi to have the quote-unquote auteur director as well. Greg Nicotero and Tom Savini for practical effects. So those are all the director points. For number 6, I had the death rules. Have somebody die ahead of time. Have somebody survive the movie because they actually killed somebody. And have the order be unknown because of the life steal rule, so to speak. At number 5, I had some visionary ideas. The idea of having 2 visionaries, the idea of having the guy or girl who had the vision survive the premonition, and the idea of the visionary dying halfway through the movie. At number 4, I had stories based on other known disasters in the series, specifically the Springfield Center Mall disaster that happened in Final Destination 4, the French theater that Rory was in, or was going to go to, and the fact that it collapsed, and the Bloodlines train at the end. And number 3, I had it be based on specific groups of people, with the first idea being based on first responders, because that's an idea they've always wanted to do. Next up, I had soldiers, or a group of soldiers, because honestly of Wipeout, the novel. Next up, I had celebrities, especially if they do a meta, since they do have an avenue that they could take it from, given the fact that there is a Final Destination-like movie within the franchise, within the world of the series. Next up, I had prisoners, then a religious character or maybe an outright cult in the movie, and then because I didn't have anywhere else to place this, to bring back Kimberly and Thomas back into the movies, specifically Kimberly, maybe Thomas. And then my second point was to have it be based on novels, direct adaptations of novels, specifically Dead Reckoning, because it's the easiest one to adapt. End of the line, because the idea of having a separate person inadvertently and accidentally causing the deaths of the survivors. Next up, I had Looks Could Kill, because you had the visionary actually being the killer this time and wipe out the unreleased novel, just to have that story actually be out there in the world, as well as having the idea that you have a survivor from another premonition coming after the people. And you can also actually split this into 2 movies, so you can have Final Destination 7 and 8 back to back. And my last point was the settings. Have it be based on Christmas, have it be based on anything pre-1900s, and have it be based somewhere else in the world, an international story. So yeah, those were all my points. I'm not really sure how many points that really is. I know I said 7, but with all the sub-points, it's really that much. Yeah, I mean, what are your ideas for Final Destination? What do you want to see? Who do you want to see be as directors, or what do you want to see the plays? Or what are your ideas? Maybe you have an idea for a specific death. I don't know. You tell me. Comment all that down below. Let me know. And yeah, that's basically going to be the last Final Destination movie I make until probably like October, to be honest with you, because now we go back to our regularly scheduled program, basically. So yeah, that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart signing off.